Welcome to PianoInspires podcast, celebrating pianists, teachers, and innovators as they share their inspiring stories about the transformative power of music.
Hello, I'm Pamela Pike, and today my guest is Dr. Ann DuHamel. Thank you for joining me, Ann.
Thank you for having me, Pam.
So I'm going to read just a very small portion of your bio so that our listeners know a little bit about you. I could go on, but I want to have time to chat with you. So praised as a poetic and, quote, a delight for the ears and the soul, end quote, pianist Ann DuHamel delights in a multidimensional and eclectic musical career. Her performances have spanned 18 countries and 37 of the United States, including Carnegie Weill Recital Hall. Ann's project, entitled Prayers for a Feverish Planet, responds to the climate crisis with 60-plus new works from composers around the world. In the spirit of eco-activism, the program asks urgent questions of the listener, such as, how can we live more mindfully as global citizens? How can we use our artistic talents to make a difference? Featured in interviews on Modern Notebook Radio and Minnesota Public Radio's All Things Considered, Ann has been awarded artist residencies at the Toft Lake Center in Minnesota and Everwood Farmstead Foundation in Wisconsin, in addition to grants from the Minnesota State Arts Board and the Lake Region Arts Council and University of Minnesota. Ann currently serves as Associate Professor of Music at the University of Minnesota Morris, where she devotes herself to the mission of sharing high-quality traditional and contemporary classical music with students and the greater community. So I know you join me in welcoming Ann, and thanks for being here again.
Thank you for having me, Pam.
So we're going to start today by seeing where Ann's roots are. So I wonder if you might talk a little about your childhood experiences with music, how music played a role in your childhood, that sort of thing.
Sure. So my family is not really that musical. I know a lot of pianists and professional musicians come from a musical family, and mine wasn't, although my parents did listen to a lot of music. My mom especially, I think, she would listen to, like Peter, Paul, and Mary and John Denver. And but when I was five, my mom bought an upright piano. And when I was in kindergarten, I'd been taking ballet lessons. And when she bought the piano, I guess that I asked/begged for lessons. I don't recall this. And she gave me a choice. She said I could either do ballet or do piano, which, by the way, I just find fascinating given what I see in my students today, how there are so many students who do so many activities. But I think this is because we lived in a very rural location, so anything we would have done, or I would have done, my mom would have been driving me. So I chose piano. And the other thing I wanted to say is, at that time, the quote unquote wisdom was that you shouldn't start piano lessons until you're 7. And I think she was a little hesitant, but I must have asked over and over and over and over. So I started lessons when I was 6. But I'm actually going to interrupt myself here and say that a couple of years ago, I was helping my parents clean out their house. This was before my dad died. But in that process, my dad gave me a bunch of slides. I don't know if people listening to this podcast remember like slides you stuck in a projector, you projected them on the wall. I mean, this was not like the fancy projections that you have today on a screen. But anyway, so he gave me a bunch of slides, and I was looking through them, and I came to a slide. It was taken before I turned 3. And we were at my grandma's house, and my grandma had a toy piano. I remember this piano, like just playing on it when I was older, but I'm very young and I'm sitting at this toy piano playing. I have no recollection. It was really interesting to see this photo of myself when I was not even 3 and encounter it in my 40s. So clearly I was drawn to music from a very early age, even though I wasn't necessarily surrounded by it.
Yeah. So it's so interesting. I had that same choice presented to me. It was dance or piano.
Yeah.
And do you think that played any role in the amount of time you were able to devote to just spending at the piano when you're young? You know, the fact that that was your chosen activity?
I think so. Well, and you know, as an elementary school student, that was my activity. And then of course, when you get to be, you know, 6th grade and 7th grade, that's when there's this explosion of activities. And I did do a lot more activities then in my junior high years, but definitely in elementary school, like that was my activity, piano. Yeah. And I think I was a pretty good practicer. I mean, I don't remember like fighting it. There's only like, I remember one time my grandma was babysitting us after school, and I came home and she said, "You have to practice now." That's like literally the only time I ever remember being told to practice out of all the years. Mm-hmm. And it's probably because my grandma was there and I wanted to do stuff with my grandma. My grandma was an educator and she wanted to make sure we got our work done first. Mm-hmm.
So tell us a little about your first teacher. Mm-hmm. Was your first teacher influential, do you think?
Yeah, you know, this is a great question. So as I said, I grew up in a rural area in Minnesota, and my first teacher, I'm not sure how my mom found her. She probably lived about 8 or 10 miles away, also in a rural area. I mean, I feel like what I learned from her was, you know, how to count, which is an important skill. But I think like she doesn't stand out as like a you know, like one of my most motivational important teachers. Mm-hmm. So she was my teacher for 3 years, and then at that point my family moved to Ottawa, Canada for 2 years because of a degree my mom wanted to earn, and it was only offered at very limited institutions in North America. So we moved to Ottawa for 2 years, and then I had a teacher there who was very active in, I think, probably like the Royal Conservatory. Yes. So I started with this teacher, and that was like my introduction to classical music. So, you know, she started me, she saw like the books that I had been using, the method books. It was like Michael Aaron method book and John Sham, you know, it was very dated here. And, you know, she put me in a curriculum, and then she was like, "Oh, Ann learns fast." And she like actually skipped me ahead. But that, I remember learning Soldier's March by Robert Schumann, and I think this is probably where I started playing the Easy Clementi Opus 36 number 1, and so she was like my first introduction to like you know, technical regimen, like what I would consider quote unquote real repertoire going outside of the method books.
So about how old were you during those years?
That was when I was in 4th and 5th grade. Okay. So 9 and 10. Okay. I was 9 and 10.
And then you moved back to the States?
And then we moved back to the States.
So tell us about your teachers then leading up to college.
Yes. So one thing I want to say is when I was in Canada, what I thought I wanted to be when I grew up was an architect. Just going to put that out there because I thought that for a long time. So we moved back, and then again I took lessons from another local teacher, and she was kind of like the teacher in the small town where we lived. She was the teacher, so like everybody took lessons from her. And I took lessons from her for I think 2 years, and there were a couple of other students in my grade, and she was like, "These students are, you know, they work hard and they are advancing." And she recognized that we needed a teacher who could do more for us, which is such a great, I mean, that's a very important quality in a teacher, to recognize what your limitations are and not let your ego, hold on. Yes. So then when I was in 8th grade, I went to another teacher this was my first introduction to Minnesota Music Teachers Association. And the Minnesota Music Teachers Association has a very robust series of programs for students. So I did the theory program, and I did the contest, and I did the piano syllabus exam, which is, I think that there are other programs like it that the syllabus, the MMTA syllabus is based on like the RCM exams. So I did several of those. And whenever I see this teacher occasionally, and whenever I see her, she always reminds me of my first interview with her. And I don't remember saying this, so I would have been probably like 13. But she says that she asked me, "What's really fun for you about piano?" And I guess I said, "I really like memorizing pieces." So I don't have zero recollection of saying that, but so I studied with her for, I think 4 years. And so she took me, through, sort of mid-intermediate into advanced, I was, playing Mozart sonatas, and I learned some of the Grieg sonata and, Clair de Lune and Bach, some movements of the first partita, lots of things. But and all of this time I thought I was going to be an architect. And then one day I wake up when I'm 16. It's like I didn't make this decision. It had been made for me. And I'm like, I'm going to study music. I don't know where this came from, other than, I guess, I've been playing the piano for 10 years by this point. So I think at this point my mom was like, oh, she's really serious and this is what she wants to study, which is, I'd been working with this teacher who was a fine teacher, but I think I was also getting to the point where I was sort of outgrowing her. And in those last 2 years with her, so this would have been 10th grade and 11th grade, I'm doing more and more things with MMTA. And we noticed that there were a lot of students who played fantastically. They played at an advanced level. They were really exciting performers, great students, and they all studied with this teacher named Paul Worth. And so the year before I went into my senior year of high school, I auditioned for Paul Worth and he accepted me, which was like very exciting for me. And that, I would say, was the thing that really transformed my piano life. So I don't know if listeners know of Paul Worth. He has had some other students who have gone on to have really exciting careers, like Reed Tetzlaff. Was a Paul Worth student. He was a semi-finalist in the Tchaikovsky competition. He's released some CDs. He's like an international performer. But
what was it about those studies with him that transformed your musicianship?
My musicianship. I mean, I feel like Paul is such a good teacher on so many levels. The first thing, even at my audition, he started to work with me on technique. And he introduced me to this idea of gravity-based technique. That's one of his things. If you go onto YouTube, you can watch his Gravity DVD, which is it's a very clear explanation of this way to play the piano. I actually have my students watch it. I describe to them it's, this long. In the first half, he's talking about the theory, and the second half, he's working with a student to break it down and then help you feel what this is like to play in a way that's easier, to play in a way that's more efficient. You don't have to put so much effort forward. So technically he really helped. Because I had no idea I was holding tension in my arms. But at my audition with him and my interview, like he could see, oh, you play like your teacher, because he knew who I'd been studying with. So there's that. He is a fantastic motivator. I'm not even really sure I can say how or why he is, but he's so enthusiastic. He's so he listens so well. He's got like really great ears.
And I suppose motivation is a personal thing for each student anyway. So it's being able to tap into what will motivate that student.
Yeah. And I think he just has such a natural gift for teaching. He's good at motivating students. And then also, I think the two big things I really learned from Paul are the motivation and then how to listen. But then I say these things. Actually, there's a third thing that I feel like I really got from Paul, which is how to prepare for a performance. How to prepare for a performance so that you're gonna have the nerves, but how to prepare in a way that you can notice the things that are happening and get right back into listening. It's kind of a Zen approach to playing. And so that actually if you have a competition, you actually go in and if you play well, it's a success. No matter what the results are.
Yeah, that's so exceptional to learn about that before college.
Yes. Well, and in fact, so this technique of how to prepare, he calls them performer burgers. And I'm not going to talk about them here in the podcast because I don't want to steal Paul's thunder. But I mean, you're not actually eating a burger. I'll just say that. But I'd done that for my senior recital in high school. But I was giving a full length recital as a sophomore, and 2 weeks before my recital, I was like, I'm going to start my performer burgers. And so, I was playing like a Bach Prelude and Fugue and Mozart Sonata and some Chopin anyways, and Rachmaninoff. So I remember I sat down to play my Mozart sonata. I was working on the A minor sonata, and I was going to do some slow practice. And I put on my metronome at a slow tempo, and I started playing, and I made it like halfway through the second measure, and my mind had already wandered. And I was like, oh, I mean, I've been playing this piece for, like a year and a half. It's like my mind already wandered. So I started again and again in the same place. But before the end of the second measure, my mind had already wandered. And I think I had to restart 8 times. And by that time, I was so frustrated with myself and sort of incredulous that, like, really? I can't focus. That, like, I made it, 8 measures or something that time before my mind wandered. But so this, I tell this to my students too. Like, I share this technique with them, and I say, your mind is going to wander because you're a human being. You're going to think like, oh, I wanted some pizza for dinner or whatever. You just have to like rein it back in. And but that has really helped me prepare for a lot of performances, so that, you're playing and you play a wrong note, and then you don't get hung up on that wrong note. It's like you can witness that it happened, and then you get right back into music, right? You're listening, because you're going to play wrong notes. We're not machines. I'm not a machine. I know there are some people who are like super accurate all the time. I'm not one of them.
Your secret is out.
I try, and you continue to learn techniques, but so I feel like that strategy for preparing for performance and teaching me, like, really the most important thing is to always be listening and absorbed and making music. There are going to be wrong notes, but are you musical and artistic? Yeah.
Really important points.
Yeah.
Actually, yeah.
Yes.
Are you being artistic? Are you listening? And it's about mindfulness, and I think that plays a role in your life now, and we might talk about that in a few minutes. But that awareness and a mindfulness.
Absolutely. It was like an introduction to mindfulness and awareness at the piano without calling it mindfulness and awareness at the piano. And I remember when I first started teaching at my current job, the University of Minnesota Morris, I was helping a student prepare for, I think she was doing a jury to go into the upper level of lessons. And I told her this, and she was like, oh, are you really into Zen? And I was like, well, I've read about Zen, but, so it's kind of a Zen-like approach, or a very yogic approach. Yeah.
So, Anne, was there anything during this is going to sound like a weird question, but throughout then your studies, you began with your bachelor's degree and ended up with a DMA, and of course now you're teaching in higher ed. But during those years, not everyone goes on to pursue a DMA. Was there anything during that time that led you to believe, no, this is the path I must take, or I want to teach in higher ed, or maybe you didn't want to teach in higher ed? I don't know.
Yeah, that's a great question, because I feel like my path is a little bit unusual. So I earned my degree. It was actually a BA. And then I knew, like, I want to go on, I want to get a doctorate. So I auditioned for master's programs, and I probably what I should have done is I probably should have taken a couple of years off between my bachelor's and master's and just worked on technique and worked on, like, I played some repertoire that was big. I probably didn't play it. Actually, I say probably. I don't think I played it at the level that I was required, but I got into a master's program with a TA. And I went to a place that liked to pretend it was an Ivy League school. So it was like the academics were very intense. I learned a lot. I had fantastic musicology professors. I had a really great theory professor. And my piano professor, like, he really emphasized technique and style, but maybe in different ways that I've had other teachers emphasize that. But so, like, about halfway through my first semester of my master's degree, I was already kind of burned out, because it's like you have to practice and you have to do these academic classes that were, for me, pretty intense. And like in my undergrad degree, I never had to write a theory paper, and I didn't have to write a musicology paper. So I'm like learning how to do these things. And then I also had a TA. So I felt like if I could do 2 of those things, I could do them both really well, but I was doing 3 things and it was a little too much. So I burned out, and I knew that I wanted to get a DMA someday, but I also knew that I wasn't ready. I didn't feel ready.
That's important.
Yes.
That recognition,
Yeah.
awareness again. Yeah.
Awareness. Yeah. So I think it was me being aware, like I need to improve my technique so that I can get into a program that I want. And also just realizing like, if I feel burned out now, I can't do more. So then I contacted Paul Worth, this very influential teacher I'd had for 1 year who I felt was really transformative. And I said, Paul, can I come and teach at your school, which is in St. Cloud, Minnesota? And he's like, sure. So I finished my master's degree and I started teaching piano at his school. And I was initially just going to do that for like 3 years, and I ended up doing it for 8 years. The first 2 years I was there, well, so let me back up. The first year I was there, I didn't have a particularly big studio. It was maybe like 12 students or 15 students. So also at that time, I happened to be teaching elementary school general music, which, I mean, of course, I had a master's degree in music. It was at a Catholic school. I didn't have an education licensure. It was very hard because, you know, as a piano performance student, you don't take music ed classes. So anyway, so I did that for 2 years, mostly because then it allowed me to have health insurance. But the second year I did it, so I had this elementary school teaching job. It was a 75% job. And then also my piano studio like exploded. So that year I was working something like 70 or 75 hours a week. It was a lot, but I also could see the end was in sight because at the end of that year, I had a big enough piano studio that I could stop working at the elementary school. And for 6 years, I just taught piano full time. Like I bought my own house, I paid off my car, I traveled to Europe. So like I was pretty successful. I didn't necessarily feel like I was successful, but I was always very grateful. Like I have degrees in music and I'm making a living with music, making a living teaching piano. So I had a great time doing that. Like I loved the school. I loved my students. There was just such a great feeling at that school. And, you know, I got to work with Paul. And I always knew like, I want to go back to school someday, but I got kind of comfortable because I liked my friends and I liked my house and I liked my job. But then in my late 20s, early 30s, I was in this relationship. And then it kind of like went nowhere and I was feeling, I don't know, I had like a midlife crisis at 30 or a 30-year-old crisis or whatever. Anyway, so this relationship was like dissolving and I was like, okay, I guess now is the time to go back to school. So, and when I was doing all of this teaching, by the way, I should say that when I did my master's degree, it had a very long title. It was, piano performance and literature with a concentration in accompanying. So I did quite a bit of collaborative work in these 8 years when I was teaching. So in my 20s and early 30s. It was mostly with students. There were 3 colleges near I lived, and I played with like tons and tons of voice students, some instrumental students. Occasionally I'd play with a professor. There was a voice professor, and I collaborated with her pretty frequently. And I also did some playing, like the keyboard with the local community orchestra. So I've been doing lots of collaborative work. And I thought actually that I might want to get a DMA in collaborative piano. But, you know, the universe just works in a very particular way. So like I auditioned for lots of schools, and I ended up going to the University of Iowa, which was not a collaborative program. But again, it's really interesting. You know, I mentioned earlier, like that day when I was 16, I woke up and it's like, oh, I'm going to study music, I guess, because that's what I'm being told. It sounds really kooky now that I say that out loud, but I was like thinking, where am I going to go? Where am I going to go? Where am I going to go? And then I woke up one day and I was like, I'm going to the University of Iowa. So it's like I hadn't consciously made this decision. It's like my subconscious must have been thinking, dreaming, considering, you know, mulling it over. And then it's like, okay, that's where you're going.
Well, and you had these 8 years of experiences to inform that decision too, whether it was explicit or implicit.
Yes.
So,
yeah.
So how did that inform? I'm going to sort of jump ahead. So how did that inform your doctorate? Because I always believe that people who have these, you know, rich musical experiences before beginning the doctorate bring so much more to the program.
Oh, I mean, I hope so. I mean, it's hard for me to be objective about myself. I would say that seems to be how people reacted to me, but only because you say that, and now I can think about that. So the teacher I studied with there, I would say that so Paul Wirth is one of my most influential teachers, but my doctoral professor, Sanya Nosakova, is amazing. She's an incredible human being. She's an incredible pianist. She is an incredible teacher. I'm probably going to cry. I was like, she was like exactly what I needed. And I spent a lot of time in the year that I did my auditions reflecting on what I wanted to get out of it. So that like the thing is in the years leading up to these auditions, I'd coached with people like pianists and singers and other people, and they were always like, Ann, you're so musical, you need to work on your technique. Like over and over and over and over I heard this. So I was like, okay, well, I guess I need to work on my technique. So, you know, I like also for myself, I was like, okay, I'm just going to start playing scales and doing technical things every day, which helped. But because she is a Russian pianist and she studied at the Moscow Conservatory, and just her approach to, like, she totally, you know, Paul helped me learn how to play with gravity, but she helped me learn like about having a really clear direct sound and what you need to do with the bridge of your hand, which seems so obvious now that I say that. I was 32 and I don't think any teacher had ever, I mean, I'd had some teachers say, oh, don't let your fingertips collapse, but they never, even Paul said that, which I would kind of work on. But I feel like there were some links that were never made clear to me. So like she really helped me develop a technique that allowed me to have a better sound. Yes. And also I feel like some of the things she shared with me, it was like things that I would struggle with because I would think this is hard. She'd be like, no, you do it like this. And it's like, suddenly it's easy. But, you know, in addition to all of her musical expertise and her technical expertise, she's just like an incredible person. She like just has such a generous, warm spirit. She's very direct because she's Russian, but you know, I was in my 30s and I appreciated that. That's what I needed. I didn't need somebody to tell me, great job. I needed somebody to say, do this and do this and do this. And, you know, I took notes in a notebook after every lesson because I felt like it was like going to one of these conferences. You know how your head feels so full of information when you're done at NCKP or MTNA? It's like, that's what it was like. After every lesson, this is 1 hour, I'd go take notes. And it was thrilling actually for me to return to school. And, you know, some people had said to me earlier in my 20s, you know, they're like, don't take a break for too long. It's so hard to go back. And I don't know, I loved going back. For me, it was so fulfilling. I wanted to be there. It was like, I'd always wanted to do it. So I think you know, you have to know yourself. If you know that you don't like to do work, then maybe do your doctorate earlier on. But
no, I think you're right. You have to know yourself, but I think also it's just awareness again. And if you know what you need, if you know your weaknesses, then you can choose a teacher or a place where you know you can develop those and nurture them properly.
Yes.
So let's talk a little bit about your life. I'll say your life now, but because you know, you engage in such interesting projects, and I don't know I don't even know if what motivates you is the right question. I don't think it is. I think you're just, I feel like you're naturally curious, you're creative, you want to find ways to take all of these experiences in your life and in the world and somehow apply those to what you do at the piano. But I could be totally wrong. This is my outsider's view of what you do. But maybe you can just tell us a little bit about some of those projects that excite you, what it is that inspired you, excited you.
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, now that you say it like that, that seems so obvious. But again, it's like, I don't necessarily see it like that. But I would say, so before I went to my doctoral degree, I was invited to play some chamber music with some faculty at a college near where I was. And we were doing the piece by Lucas Foss, 13 Ways of Looking at a Blackbird, which is a really cool piece. It's percussion, soprano, flute, and piano. But I got to do all these weird, kooky things with it, like throw Tibetan singing bowls on the strings. You're nodding. Do you know this piece?
Yeah, yes.
It's cool. So, but even before that, like in my master's degree, I wouldn't have remembered this, but earlier this year I saw somebody I did my master's degree with, and he was talking about when I played the Emalu Diemer Toccata, which was super fun. And he said just like how I sort of lit up when I played that, and I had such a good time. So I have been gravitating more and more to new music, and it seems like I have an affinity for it. It seems like, some of it I play well. I mean, I probably am not going to choose to play Pierre Boulez because that's really hard. But there's, other pieces that I play. There's actually so much incredible new music that's really imaginative and has a lot of variety. So anyway, I have been doing more and more new music, and I'm going to come back to your question, but I'm going to take a circuitous way to get there. Okay. So I teach at the University of Minnesota Morris, and I'd been at the University of Iowa for 3 years, and I'd just finished my coursework, but I had a bunch of things left to do in my degree. And at the end of the 3rd year, Alan Huckleberry, who was my pedagogy professor, sent me a job ad at the University of Minnesota Morris. It was temporary. He's like, Ann, you might be interested in this. And so I'm thinking to myself, this would be a good practice job application. So I was like, I'll practice writing my cover letter. I'll update my CV, So I did all those things, and then they invited me to campus for an interview, and then they gave me a job. And so I took the job because that's what you're supposed to do. But I hadn't done my comps yet, and I hadn't finished my final recital requirement. I hadn't written my dissertation. So anyway, what would have taken me a year maybe took me then 5 years, because I was working full time and also finishing my doctorate. So during this time, I'm starting to play more new music, but my first 6 years at Morris were temporary contracts. So it was like, it would be a 1-year contract, and then it would be renewed. 1-year contract, then it'd be renewed. 1-year contract. So then it went tenure track. They did a national search. Luckily, they hired me into the job that I was already doing. And so I felt like I had to make a strong case about what I was doing as scholarship, right? Because I'm not writing papers. My degree is a DMA. It's an applied performance degree. I mean, I could work on writing articles, but really what I was drawn to is playing, and this trajectory was more new music. So I remember being at a conference, I think it was MTNA, but it may have been an NCKP. And Jerry Wong was the speaker, and he was talking about how he had commissioned Seymour Bernstein to write pieces for him, and how he made a case in his tenure file to the committee that this is like the scholarship of now I can't remember. It was the Boyer model of scholarship, which is there's different kinds of scholarship. It's not all writing papers. And this, I was like, ooh, this is really good, because this bolsters my argument that what I'm doing, this creative work, and it's as important as writing a paper. Yes. It's as important as doing this.
But if I can interrupt for a minute, I think you're correct and you're wise that in higher ed, especially today, probably now more than ever, we need to be continually making that case.
Yes.
I think because there are some academics who don't understand that or forget that. And so
absolutely.
Really important work. Just even that making the case, and it takes time, but it's critical.
Yes, it takes time, and you have to be smart about how to be persuasive.
Yes.
I mean, I find that I have some colleagues who are not performing musicians, and they are not, I don't find that what they write is persuasive about our discipline. You have to really persuade people. So anyway, in thinking about this, so I've just gone into the tenure track. I mean, people at my school like me, they know that I'm active. I'm giving concerts every year. I'm going out and doing things. But I was like, okay, I need to do things that are new. And it's like, I can't actually do things that are related to my dissertation. I need to do new things. So around this time, I have a good friend who was at Iowa with me. She's a singer. She lives in Minneapolis. She started an art song festival with a pianist in Minneapolis. It's called Source Song Festival. And by the way, if you're a collaborative pianist, it's fantastic. You should totally go. Because Libby Larson is the composer who is associated with it. So I attended this a few years, and I met some composers who I didn't actually know of in Minnesota, because they write a lot of art song, they write a lot of choral music, but like some of their music I just fell in love with. And so this is rumbling around in my head, like maybe I can commission some people. And then around the same time, I'm kind of going off in all sorts of tangents, but it's like you get to know a little bit about some of my projects. So,
well, and I think the other thing is it helps our listeners to know that, sometimes we envision that the path is direct, linear. It's rarely, if ever,
rarely.
that way.
I mean, I can look back and say, oh, this is how the trajectory worked, but it's not linear.
I mean, I think you need a guiding, wouldn't you agree? You need a guiding inspiration goal, but yeah, and I think you have to be open to taking a different turn.
Absolutely.
So keep going.
So keep going. So around the same time, so people who are listening, they might be familiar with the Facebook group, The Art of Piano Pedagogy. So these kind of coincidences would not have happened like 20 years ago. But so anyway, Benjamin Steinhardt had posted something in The Art of Piano Pedagogy. It was a piece by a composer named Mark Chan called Playing Schumann. And I was probably procrastinating because I sometimes procrastinate. I didn't want to write email or something or grade, I don't know. Anyway, so I listened to this piece, Playing Schumann, and I was floored. It was so beautiful because what the composer, Mark Chan, did is he took Robert Schumann's Des Abends from Opus 12, which I think is a beautiful piece. I played it in undergrad. D flat major is my favorite key because I'm a nerd. Anyway, so he took this the original Schumann, and then he wrote this amazing texture around it. And I was totally captivated by this piece, Playing Schumann. And so I didn't know Mark Chan, but out of the blue, I email him. I'm like, hey, I love your piece. I have access to these small grants at my institution. At this time, I was thinking maybe I can do a Schumann and Brahms related program. So I said, can I commission you to write a piece for me that's based on Brahms and not based, since you did this piece based on Schumann. So he wrote back almost immediately, which is super exciting. And he said, yes, I'd love to do it. So long story short, he wrote a piece for me called Playing Brahms. It's 2 movements, and each movement is based on one of the Opus 39 waltzes. So this happened, and then I was able to get funds to commission 2 women composers from Minnesota that I had met at Source Song Festival. And at this point, I'm thinking I love this idea of writing a piece based on Brahms, and then also the idea of transformations. Just personally, that is a very intriguing idea to me. So Edie Hill wrote me a piece called Rückblick, and you might not know Edie's name, but some of her music was on a recording this year that won a Grammy by the Choir The Crossing, so that's kind of fun. And then Jocelyn Hagen is the other composer from Minnesota, and she's written lots of great choral music and art song. So they wrote pieces for me based on Brahms, and then I really liked the piece. I mean, I really liked all of the pieces, but I loved Mark's piece so much I said, I want to commission you again. And so he was in St. Paul, Minnesota for another event. We met, we had lunch. I don't remember what this was. I'm going to say 2018, but I'm not sure that's correct because my sense of time is all askew since the pandemic. So anyway, we were talking about what he might use as source material for another piece that I would commission. And, at one point he had suggested, it would be really fun to have a whole series of pieces, and each one is based on a different waltz from Opus 39. So anyway, I commissioned him to write a piece, and I was thinking it was going to be a set of variations or something. And not very long after I got this grant, I secured it 2 months or something. I don't know. It didn't take him very long at all. He writes to me and he says, Ann, I have your piece. It was supposed to be 15 minutes. He's like, it's actually a whole set of rags. I have 1 rag for each one of the Opus 39 waltzes. So it's 16 rags. It takes 40 minutes. And I was like, this is amazing. So here I have enough to do a recording. And it's all new music. They're all, and I should say that I also had some friends who I knew from Iowa who also wrote pieces for me. So that project is, me thinking, how can I commission people, and how can I commission women composers from Minnesota? It's the local connection and underrepresented composers and just composers I liked and some people who were my friends. Mm-hmm. So it was just over 79 minutes of music. It actually worked out beautifully. So, so that project was that, Brahms and transformation. And right around the time I was about to record that, there's this explosion, what I perceive as an explosion of news about climate change. Of course, I try to pay attention to the news, and my husband is sort of a NPR junkie, so there's news going on all the time in our house. But I just felt like what used to be an occasional news item, like once a month, twice a month, suddenly became like every week, every day, every hour, several times an hour. And it was like, it just hit me. And first what I wanted to do was crawl under the covers and read Harry Potter. Like, it's like, you want to escape because it is overwhelming, totally overwhelming.
But you didn't.
I didn't.
Used your music.
I did. I mean, I was thinking, what can I do? Because I try to do things that are thoughtful about the environment. Like I live in a small town, so I can walk to work. It takes me 22 minutes to walk to my office. I don't walk when it's -40 or when it's icy, but I can walk to school. I walk to the grocery store. I walk to the gym. I walk to the movie theater. When I moved into my house, it was like all lawn, and every year I take out more lawn and put in more native plants. So, that, trying to do things like that. I planted trees last year. We recycle, we compost, we do these things, but it didn't feel like it was enough. So I was thinking, well, maybe I can do a musical program that's music about climate change. And this idea, that idea gave me some hope. It gave me some courage. So this project evolved out of a feeling of despair and has become something like, it actually feels like very significant to my life's work. Yeah.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
I mean, it is. It
Yeah.
has to be. I'm glad it feels that
Yeah.
way
Yeah.
because as an outsider, it certainly looks that way. And it,
Yeah.
I think it speaks to the power of music. It shows how you can take something that doesn't seem like it's related to your professional life, but actually you can use it to change people's minds and hearts and hopefully actions.
That is my hope.
And talk about programming a little bit. I think you're masterful at your programming. I think too many people think I'm just going to program and not worry about my audience. I don't think you believe that.
I don't believe that. And when I think it's really important to have works that your audience can engage with. And even if sometimes they challenge your audience, I think you want to have a balance. So yes. So when I'm programming, I have many pieces in this project. 60, it's going to be more than 60 because I've also started to commission some underrepresented composers. But thinking about how can I have a theme? So I have a program that I could do that's all pieces related to water. And I think about what narrative is happening when I do the program. Where does it start? Where does it take people? Where does it end? And thinking, so this year I've been on sabbatical and I haven't been playing all 60 pieces when I've been playing because it's more than 8.5 hours of music. I say it's more than 8.5. I haven't actually counted. It's probably 12. I don't know. It's a lot of music. So I play a recital that's around 70 minutes of music, but some places want less, so I can, it's very flexible. Some places, they're we can do up to 2 hours, so then I do a little more. But I think about, where does it start? How does it go? Where does it end? What's powerful? And I think about where do I put the pieces that are really dissonant and challenging and crunchy and demanding, and then how can I have something that follows it that is more consonant, and how can I have a piece that's beautiful, and where do I put that, and how does it have a big impact? And so yes, I do think about that.
It's critical. It's critical
for
your audience's participation and their
engagement.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
So how have you heard from audiences who've heard some of this music? What's the impact that even this program or these programs, what impact is it having on them?
Oh, thanks. That's a great question. And when I have given the program, I invite people. So at the very beginning, I give a little bit of context, and then I invite people to talk to me afterwards. And not everybody stays and talks to me afterwards, but some people do. We're still coming back from the pandemic, so audiences have not been huge, but the people who are there seem really committed, and they seem to be really buoyed up by this music, and it's really great to talk to students about this for, I would say, 2 reasons. I'll probably talk about this at my PEDX talk as well, but I've heard comments from students. The first is, this has happened in more than one place, where like I'm talking to students and I see this dawning recognition on their faces that I can use music for these kinds of topics, for social justice topics, for topics that go beyond music, for topics that you think would not relate to music at all, and just how you can use your own personal skill set to make a difference. Like, that's amazing.
That's huge.
It's huge. It's absolutely huge. And I think for this generation of students that are studying music, college students, graduate students, even younger students, that is a really important thing for them to have. And I also, there was a student, a graduate student at a university in Texas where I played, and she made the comment that this proves that classical music is still relevant. And I loved that comment. Mm-hmm. I think it's, for hundreds of years, we've been told classical music is dying. It's not dying. It's very vibrant, but it maybe doesn't look the same as it did 50 years ago. But, classical music is relevant. It can speak directly to issues of social justice. It can speak directly to climate change. It can speak directly to our human concerns.
Right. Well, I think your career has illustrated that,
Mm-hmm.
and the work that you're doing now and will continue to do. It's a living example of the importance of music in our lives, and as you say, speaking to social justice issues, other concerns that we have in our world, and will continue to have. So yes. I think that's vital, and it's, as you say, important for our younger people to see that they can make a difference in the world through their music as well.
Yes.
So, Ann, I want to thank you for joining us today. This has been wonderful.
Thank you for having me. It went so fast.
It did, but before, well, I have one final question, and it's a big one.
A big one.
But it isn't. How does piano inspire you?
How does piano inspire? I mean, I feel like it sort of infuses everything. I do. I mean, I feel like I take inspiration from playing late Beethoven sonatas. I take inspiration from playing the Brahms Klavierstück, from working on concertos, but I also take inspiration from the music in this project. It's been fantastic to just meet so many composers and connect with them. And from this project, some of the composers have written other pieces for me, which I think is like amazing. Thank you, composers. It's really an honor. I mean, I feel so grateful that they have entrusted and shared their music with me, and so grateful and happy, delighted that they are so pleased with how I'm playing, that they have given me other things. I mean, it's really fruitful collaboration. So I feel like I don't know if I'm doing a great job of answering this question, but it inspires me in lots of different ways. Yeah.
Well, thank you. And I will hazard a guess that you inspire us, and you've inspired lots of listeners today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your work, and keep up the great work.
Thank you, Pam. Thank you. And thank you to all the listeners. It has been a true pleasure. I have a website. You can find me there. I love to talk to people about my projects and learn about you. So thank you.
Great. Thanks.
The Francis Clark Center is a not-for-profit educational organization that serves the advancement of piano teaching, learning, and performing. Divisions include Piano Magazine, PianoInspires Kids, Journal for Piano Research, National Conference on Keyboard Pedagogy, the New School for Music Study, Piano Education Press, International Online Teacher Education, and PianoInspires Online Community Hub. Please visit us at pianoinspires.com to learn more about our impactful work and inspiring community.